All right, well, good afternoon. I hope you had a good walking tour. This afternoon's training topic is on walkable communities. And the fundamental question that I think we need to wrestle with is this one on the screen right now, which is, does the walkability of your Main Street community or district translate into dollars and cents? Does the walkability of your downtowns translate into economic value? And if it doesn't, then we shouldn't worry about it. Because, you know, I want to say for the record, hopefully without offending anybody, the purpose of Main Street is not to just do fun festivals. The purpose of Main Street is just not to make the place look pretty. The purpose of Main Street is to generate sustainable economic development in our downtowns through the vehicle of historic preservation. And if we can't figure out how to do all the things that we work so hard at to make money for our communities, I hate to be blunt, but we're kind of sort of wasting our time, okay? So we have to have a very compelling and thoughtful answer to this question. Now, here's my suspicion. I can't imagine you'd be in this room if you didn't intuitively think that the answer to this question is yes, correct? I mean, you agree that walkability makes sense to downtown. We all agree? But my suspicion is this: while we understand that intuitively, we would probably struggle if somebody put a microphone in front of us and said, give me some statistics and some facts to back it up. Can I get an amen? Yeah. And so that's why we have to turn to certain professionals to help us, with this conversation. And one of the simplest places to start, of course, many of you probably know Andrea with the Main Street Center. This is her response to that question, an article she wrote for what's the name of the Main Street Journal anymore?
Main Street Now.
Yeah, that. Can the walkability of your Main Street district translate into dollars and cents? Well, we know that enhancing the pedestrian orientation of Main Street communities does more than simply keep your design committee volunteers busy. It creates a cohesive atmosphere, improves safety for motorists and pedestrians, builds foot traffic for businesses, encourages interaction in public spaces, and adds vibrancy to the street. But here's where it gets compelling. But in a new report by Joseph Courtwright, who is a gentleman that Jeff Speck quotes quite liberally throughout his book, who is the chairman of CEOs for Cities, he says walkability is also linked to higher property values. And here's where the news gets even better. Luckily for Main Streets, the urban design of traditional commercial districts is inherently walkable. Therefore, when we have thoughtful streetscaping projects that reconfigure roads, improve parking, introduce traffic calming measures, and add pedestrian amenities that leverage existing walkable assets. While the value of the commercial building prices wasn't measured in the study, commercial areas thrive with increased walkability. And the many financial and health-related benefits make pedestrian-oriented initiatives well worth the investment. All right, so the statement at the beginning by Andre basically says yes, and there's a bunch of statistics to back it up. But I want to make it painful for you first. I want us to feel some tension about this question from our own experience before we get to the facts and the figures. So the first pop quiz that we're going to take together is we're going to ask and answer this question. Which of these basic amenities can you access within a 5-minute walk of your house? Okay, we're going to make it a little easier in the next slide. We're going to compare it back to your Main Street district. But for now, the question on the table is the question that these guys typically ask, which I think is the right question, is not use, it's like, what do human beings do? And we want to make sure they can do those things in our downtowns. So we're going to start with where we live. And so when shopping for basics, this is how I'm going to define that. You have to buy a pair of socks and a pair of underwear. Okay, so that's the kind of shopping you've got to find within a 5-minute. And so we're all going to start with our hands raised, and as I go down the list, and I've tried to do you a favor and rank these according to the easiest, typically to supply in our neighborhoods and towns, to the hardest. And I want to see how long we can keep our hands raised. Okay, so in other words, everybody's hands up in the air, like you don't care. There we go. All right, so how many of you can access a restaurant within 5 minutes from your house? A park. It's getting sadder by the moment. Shopping for basics as defined by a pair of underwear and some socks. Good. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Susie, you can't. Come on. Well, New York High Style has it. Okay. Your office, 5-minute walk from your house. Okay, good. Now here's a school for your children. Not just a school, but a school that you would actually conceivably send your child to. All right? A grocery store. Oh, wow, I'm shocked. The hands are still up. A hospital or medical facility. Good. A library. Good. Last but not least, not a house of worship, but the house of worship if you attend church where you worship. So you're the only one. Did he misunderstand the text? There's no way that this is going down to King Street. Okay. There's always one in the room, William. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Thanks for, all right. All right, so next one, let's change the question to which of these basic amenities can you access within a 5-minute walk of your Main Street district, which is probably coincidental with your downtown commercial district, okay? Hands in the air. Restaurant. Good, I would have been depressed. A park. Good. Shopping. Okay, I figured a few hands would go down, okay? Your office, not a office, but your office. Okay, good, good. We're doing good. A school for your children. Terrific. A grocery store. This is probably where some hands we're going to lose some, yep. A hospital and medical facility. This is probably we're going to lose a bunch. No? Good. A library. Very good. And your house of worship. All right. So the point I just tried to make is this. Intellectually, we agree that we want all these things within a walkable distance, and yet for so few of us, it actually can occur. And we need to change that environment because here's where it gets really hard. All right, now I'm about to provoke you even more about why this is so important. Who's familiar with the website walkscore.com? Okay. Yeah, this is kind of the Bible, if you will, for millennials and a lot of people making relocation choices. All you have to do is go to this website, you type in your zip code, hit the button, and you will either be very sad or very happy. Okay? I kept my hand up for both of those questions up until the last bullet point. I could access everything on the list except my personal church. And guess what my walk score was in downtown Columbia, South Carolina? It's either 54 or 58. Now, while that may sound okay on a scale of 0 to 100, compared to passing and failing, it's not good. And according to Richard Florida in his most recent book, he said, if your score is below 70, you can forget about recruiting millennials to your community. They just aren't going to come because they are so far less associated with even preferring to drive and own cars. And so they have to have a product that they can access through walkability and or transit. And again, not that we want to put all of our eggs in the millennial basket, but that is the way our society is trending. And so understand. And then there's a very real correlation between a high walkability community, especially through WalkScore, and the actual retail values associated with that community. So the simple point I'm trying to make at the start is this. If we all know that walkability is so incredibly valuable and beneficial, both for our local real estate values, our health benefits, and recruiting people, then why are so few of our communities walkable? And that's where I would say it's good to call in the experts. Going in a clockwise fashion, you've probably heard Jeff speak. I think he was one of the keynotes at our Atlanta National Main Street conference, and he wrote, in my estimation, after reading almost all of these, the similar work on walkability called Walkable City, and I'll describe his in great detail. Up at the top right is Dan Burton. You'll never find him without the mustache and his walking vest, doing on the ground. And then down here is a Danish architect, city planner called Jan Gale. We're going to focus primarily on Jeff's book. Well, first of all, how many of you have read Jeff's book, Walkable City? Okay, good. That was my assumption, was most of you have not. And so for the three of you who have, my apologies, I am going to review, but hopefully you'll still learn something new. For the rest of you, I'm going to basically be going to give you a really fast book summary, and hopefully, but let me just go on the record. you should absolutely go buy and read the book. And you can get it dirt cheap used on Amazon. And by the way, if you're cold, my coat's right over here. I'm selling it highest bidder, whoever needs it, okay? But we're going to focus here. The other reason I want to focus on Jeff's book is because I think Dan and Jan take kind of two different extremes. They're both very good, but I think Jeff's is the most applicable. Dan is just, he's very much a practitioner. He's hands on the street. Whereas Jan is a very big picture thinker, and Jeff tends to be in the middle. So again, his book is entitled Walkable City, and he first has what he calls the general theory of walkability, and it's simply stated this way. In order for people to, the key word is prefer walking over driving, I'm not saying for them to walk, but for them to prefer walking over driving, it has to have at least these four qualities. It has to be a useful walk, a safe walk, a comfortable walk, and an interesting walk. And if it doesn't have those characteristics, then who in their right mind would want to walk, okay? And then he has these specific 10 steps of walkability that assign or align themselves with each of those four qualities of a purposeful, enjoyable walk. And so let's just go through these one at a time really quickly. And the way I'm going to structure this talk is this way. I'm going to spend roughly half the time, maybe a little bit more, picking apart Jeff's 10 points. And I'm going to do you the favor of trying to kind of dial it down to the scale of South Carolina. I'm only in very brief passing going to talk about Dan's work and Jan's work. And then the favor I've tried to do, and hopefully successfully, and if not, that's okay, we'll just have a conversation about it at the end, is that I try to take their big ideas, regrettably more times than not focused on large towns, and interpolate it down to the scale that would be most typically applicable to the scale of communities in our Main Street, South Carolina. Okay, but I could be wrong, and that's why I'm going to invite this as a two-way conversation. For example, Wilson, I was thrilled to find out today that you're a cyclist. He has a lot to say about that, and it's a realm I don't operate in. I was glad to hear about Sumter and your parking structure because he's going to talk about that. So let's jump right in. The first is put cars in their place. His very, very provocative quote is, traffic studies are bull crap. Or, I don't know why crap is any better word than the other one, but anyway. And what he means by that, he's not trying to pick a fight necessarily. He's just saying numbers are numbers. A figure's a liar, and liars can figure. And he's had the same traffic reports based on the local DOT crunching the numbers versus his guys crunching the numbers, and they can say the two different things just by changing a few variables. And so the point he's making is, I'm not saying traffic studies are bad. You just have to understand, you can make a traffic study say anything you want it to say. And if those traffic studies are being performed by the very people who are putting in the roads, then you've got the foxes guarding the hen house, okay? And so he's saying, be very, very careful. And the key principle that he says that they always fail to take into consideration is the principle of induced demand, which stated simply means people build roads because they're trying to relieve congestion, but the more roads they build, they just fill back up with more cars. Because the people who avoided that road because it was too congested now say it's not too congested, and so guess what? They get on that same road. And so it doesn't matter how many roads you build, they're always going to be filled up. And that's why he says, if you build it, more will come. And the funny point that he makes is, don't forget that you are the traffic. We always talk about those other people, but we're in the car too. It's like if you don't want to be the traffic, then don't drive. And I love this quote, congestion saves fuel because people hate to waste time being miserable. I got to tell you, as somebody who lives in downtown Columbia, for the life of me, I don't understand the logic behind the people who leave every day to go to Irma and drive through rush hour traffic. I would stick a needle in my eye before I did that to myself every day. But I understand their logic, and I'm going to get to that in just a second, in the second point, because it all goes back to schools. Point number 3. So the second big idea or point he makes to make our communities walkable is we have to mix the uses. Regrettably, our cities, due to the way that they were zoned historically, and you have to go way, way back to understand why did we even think about zoning, kind of isolating one use from the other. And it goes back to centuries ago, when we didn't have as good a health standards as we did now, and the fact that we had these industries right beside our residential units, and the contaminations from those were creating all these sicknesses, so we segregated all these uses, but the problem is we threw the baby out with the bathwater. And so what we have now is you can't have this type of use here because it's not zoned there. You can only have it here, here, and here. And so what happens is our zoning itself can sometimes separate and segregate our uses, making it almost impossible for us to walk to all those uses. I mean, just a while ago, we had just a very basic list of things that normal human beings do, and I don't think there was a one of us who kept their hand up the entire time. I mean, that's an indictment. And so that's one of the fundamental questions. What do people, human beings do? They work, they eat, they sleep, they worship, they celebrate, they congregate, they meet, they heal. We have got to have spaces available for those. And ideally, you should never have to leave downtown to do them. Okay, I think that ought to be our standard. The single greatest need, well, first of all, let me say, just looking at this photograph, that to me is the best mixed-use product on the planet. Because in that one photograph alone, if your zoning allowed it, you could put every conceivable mix that you need to accomplish the list that we just talked about. You could have retail on the first floor, offices on the second, housing on the third, and all the mix there and in between. But the single greatest need that we have in our downtowns to make them walkable is housing. Said most simply, you have to have places to walk from. And here's the deal. The problem with our housing in downtowns, typically, Aiken's kind of an oddity, and I mean that in a complimentary way. In most towns, I have to be I'm trying to think of a diplomatic way to say this. The only housing we have in downtown is affordable housing. The issue is not having affordable housing, it's having accessible housing. And so we have got to flip the equation so that some of the highest price point housing resides in the downtown area and change it. And I know there's some communities who are doing just that, and Aiken's a good example. It sounds like Greenwood is turning the corner on that as well. But the single biggest impediment to housing is schools. And this is so frustrating for me as an architect / quasi-wannabe planner. You know, I go into these communities and we ask all these input questions about your strengths and your weaknesses and how can we do this, and it always comes back to either schools or jobs, schools or jobs, schools or jobs. Typically it's schools. And the reason, and that's how I figured it out, the reason somebody defying all logic would subject themselves to rush hour traffic, every day 2 ways is to educate their children. Because you can, if Susie and I were going to be honest with you, I would feel comfortable sending my kids to the elementary school in our neighborhood, but I certainly wouldn't send them to the middle school or the high school. And here's the only point I want to make. Fixing our schools is not our job, but we better care about it. Because there is a direct correlation between the downtown school offerings and our ability to recruit housing downtown, especially for families. Now, you can recruit people without children, no problem. But if you're, and by the way, you probably noticed that in our neighborhood, when we get families with kids, they do good until the kids get to mid school and then they're gone. It's just this constant turnover. Some of the things that we have to address to make housing happen: politics, permitting, and pathfinding. And again, back to Aiken, I'm just going to hold them up as a poster child. Their elected leaders get it, and they're doing something about it. They've relaxed certain permitting, or make sure, when it comes to permitting for housing, my attitude is this: make sure you know what's a battle and what's a war, okay? And let's make sure we win the war, and if we need to compromise on some battles, let's do it. And then the pathfinding, the whole Connect Aiken, the business incubator, the one-stop shop, the whole notion of streamlining the process for a developer to be able to put housing in your downtown. Third, get the parking right. I love this quote: any place worth its salt has a parking problem. Think about your favorite places that you go to visit. I guarantee you probably have a tough time finding a parking place. So you have to understand that in one way we want a parking problem in our downtowns. Just sheer numbers alone tells you we've got to get the roadway right and we've got to get the parking right. In a typical downtown environment, the roadway itself takes up between, depending on the scale and the size of the road, 25% on the low end, 35% of the land mass on the high end. Compound that with the fact that parking is the single largest land use, I'm not talking about area, I'm just talking about use in virtually any and all American cities. If you're going to get this right, you've got to solve the roads and you've got to solve the parking. And so the key things that he advocates for, and by the way, I'm going to give you I'm going to tell you what he says, and I'm going to push back if I think it's appropriate to push back. He is fairly militant about this. I think far more than we in the South would be comfortable with. I mean, he wants to charge out the wazoo for parking. He wants to make it painful for people to park, especially on your streets, because he wants to move them off the streets into either your surface lots or your parking structures. And therefore, he's very big on setting appropriate values. The problem is so often, if we give away the parking space on the road for free and then we charge for the parking structure, guess what? You're going to have empty parking garages all day long. And people aren't going to be able to park on the street and they're going to get frustrated. You need to flip that equation and make it really painful and expensive to park on the street and easy to park off the street. Make sense? Okay. This is a new concept. I'd never heard of this. I love the idea. It's called a parking benefit district. Now, a lot of you don't charge for parking, and that's fine. But if you do, then it would make sense to create a parking benefit district, and it means exactly what it sounds like. If you're going to charge, then make sure the money generated goes back to benefit the area that's generating the income. In other words, if you have meters, and let's just say the meters are in downtown Aiken, well, let's make sure that all the change that comes out of those meters gets reinvested into enhancements and improvements in downtown Aiken. It's just fair. You've created the engine to draw people there to park, therefore you should be the recipient and be able to direct the funds to be spent in the district itself. And here's one of the things that I knew and I'd heard about it, but it finally kind of clicked with me. I can't underscore enough the importance of reviewing your regulations to make sure they aren't impediments to growth. For example, earlier we found out humorously that the reason Lawrence didn't enjoy projecting signs was you had a law that prohibited it. And I forgot the quote until later, Jonathan. The gentleman, I'll tell you who the gentleman was later, when I proposed it, and I said, this historic, sign comes out there. I said, well, you need to allow for this. As a matter of fact, I even went so much. You shouldn't even have an ordinance about that specific kind of sign. They ought to just create the mounting mechanisms and let's handle the design and the size and all that stuff through your review commission. And this gentleman said, every design issue has to be black and white in the form of an ordinance. And I just want to say, sir, the only person smart enough to have done that, we will celebrate his resurrection on Sunday. There's nobody on the planet smart enough to codify every design issue you were facing downtown. But that was his attitude, and that's why those signs were prohibited for so many years. The problem is the same kind of thinking in regulations is what prohibits redevelopment of some of our historic buildings. It is sometimes parking that's the deal breaker. And the reason is because remember how I talked about most of our zoning is like specific use, specific use? And probably in 80% of your towns, if I went to your zoning regulations right now, I'd flip a page and it'd say, for this use in this location, you need X number of parking spaces per square footage. And the problem is, if you go in to redevelop a historic building, let's say for a high occupancy use, housing or a restaurant, there's no way on God's creation you can satisfy by right the parking regulations of that ordinance. And so the regulation itself prohibits the actual use of the buildings in the downtown that you want it to have. Now obviously we have warnings of appeals and you get appeals, but it ought to be by right. Number 4, I got to pick up the pace. Let transit work. Now this is the point that probably has little application for most of us in South Carolina, with the exception of maybe bus transit. I don't foresee a day, any place in South Carolina, frankly, that'll have a subway or mass transit, okay? So take this with a grain of salt. And so the only thing that I think is applicable, I love this quote, while walkability benefits from good transit relies absolutely on walkability. When I taught my 3 kids how to drive, they were so mad at me because every day when we started, I forced them to park. Parallel park, angle park, get it in there, get it out there. I'm like, Dad, why do we have to spend so much time parking? I said, tell me how you can take a trip in a car without parking. You can't. You will have to park the car and and get it out of our parking space in order to take a trip. And the point he makes that we always forget is that every transit trip always begins and ends with a walk. You ever thought about that? If you go into the bus stop, if you go into the airport, if you go into your car even, every transit trip begins and ends with a walk. And therefore, even if we aren't transit dependent, let's make the walk to and from the transit opportunities pleasurable. Whatever's good for the transit benefits the walkers and vice versa. All right, now we're going to talk about protecting the pedestrian. Pop quiz. This is going to make you feel good, and it's going to take the pressure off. I failed this test miserably, and I'm a design professional, for crying out loud. All right, so we're going to rank these. Which of the below treatments, in your opinion, affords the greatest safety to the pedestrian? Okay. How many think crosswalks provide the greatest safety to the pedestrian? Raise your hand. Oh, please, put this up. No.
In Lawrence, it's the least safe.
No, we're going to get to that. Okay. Yeah, could be. All right. Who thinks that the lane width that the automobile is the greatest safety device for the pedestrian? Just out of curiosity, are any of y'all going to vote at any point in this? Okay, I want to make sure. All right. Trees. Wow. Okay. Curbside parking. Good. You're wrong, but that's good. All right. Block size. Very good. You can tell the northerner. All right. Sidewalk width. All right. Guess what? That was exactly my answer, and we were 100% wrong. That's the one that provides the least amount of safety. All right. Here they are in order, and I'll explain why. The number one thing that will cause a pedestrian to feel safe in your downtown is the lane widths for the car. Number two is the block size. Here's why. You first have to slow down the people that are, hold on a second. Yeah, we have to first slow down the drivers in their lane. Okay, that's the first thing. We've got to slow traffic down. The thing that causes the pedestrian to feel most unsafe is when traffic is moving fast. So we have to first slow them down while they're in the lane. All right. And we do that through lane widths and through block size. In other words, if you shorten the block, they can't get up enough speed to go fast because they're always approaching an intersection. I got science to back me up. I'm just kidding. All right, the next two are the things that prevent the car from leaving their lane to hit you. And so number three would be curbside parking, that big hunk of metal between you and the car, and trees. And in other words, it's all the barriers that would keep a car that accidentally leaves its lane from coming and striking a pedestrian. And then the final two things that promote pedestrian safety would be the crosswalk widths and the sidewalk widths, which is kind of surprising. Like I said, I admit it, I did the same thing you did. I had it completely backwards. And so I think we got to educate ourselves so that we can educate our community. So here's what he says about protecting the pedestrian. The safest roads are those that feel the least safe. Yeah.
Stupid. Lane width. Is that wide or does it mean narrow?
Thank you. It means narrow them down. In other words, most of our downtown lane widths are roughly 12 feet wide. Most cars can comfortably fit in a 10. At the most, they ought to be 11. But if you can neck them down to 11, preferably 10, you will cause the pedestrian to feel much, much safer.
So that would be good.
I love you. That was a great segue, Susie. Yeah, the concept of road diet is you just narrow the widths, and what do you think we do with that extra width that we gained? Or? Thank you. I was waiting for the cyclist to tell me exactly. You put the bike lanes in. Yep, and we're going to get to new strategies for bike lanes in just a moment. Now, the complete version of this sentence, by the way, so you'll know exactly what it means, is the safest roads for pedestrians are the ones that feel the least safe for the motorists. You got it? If you can make the motorists feel uncomfortable, they will automatically and always and necessarily slow down. It always goes back to traffic speed in terms of pedestrian safety. What makes you feel the safest is when the traffic is not moving fast beside you. And I'll be honest with you, again, thank you for pushing me on this topic because I learned so much. And this was one of the ones. I always thought that all of these devices that we've come up with to promote pedestrian safety, like, the flashing cross lights and the pedestrian actuated things that you can change the light and, the little flop signs that say state law, stop for the people. I always thought all those are good things. And by the way, they are good things. But here's the unintentional consequence of the message that we've sent to the motorists. Is when we redesigned our streets, we made the lanes wider so that the motorists could go faster. We removed the trees because, does everybody know what trees are referred to in our DOT manuals? FHOs. Stands for Fixed Hazardous Objects. So we have to get rid of all those things. And all of those things in the minds of the motorists said, now I can go faster. And so to counterbalance that for pedestrian safety, then we introduced all of these, I don't want to use the word gimmicks because they're better than gimmicks, but it's the flashing sign, it's the pedestrian actuated things, and it's the crosswalk textures. The problem is the unintended message that we sent to the motorists, we didn't mean to, is I only have to pay attention to the pedestrian there. Everywhere else belongs to me in the car. And that's not the message that we want to send about downtown. The message we want to send about downtown is this is a place. You drive to, you don't drive through. But all of our roadway designs and everything else says this is how you drive through the place. Does that make sense? I'm kind of preaching now. Okay. And that's why block size matters. And I didn't even understand that, but it's so true. When I think about New York City, when I think about Boston, it's like, why do you enjoy walking? Because there's so much vibrancy in the style of the block and the scale of the block changes literally about every 3 minutes. Downtown Columbia, oh my Lord, I feel like I walked 15 minutes before I get to the end of the block. And the problem, if you're the motorist, it's like, remember, we are the traffic. When I drive, I got to beat the next signal, right? And so with a 600-foot block, you can get up to 30, 35 real easy, real fast, and apparently in Manning even faster. And so the shorter the blocks, the slower they go. Now, most of you are thinking, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it off in the past, but we can't redesign our block sizes. They're already done for us. I got some gimmicks for us, okay? There's a fantastic, when I talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of this book, that he gives away so many phenomenal free resources. And this is one of them. And I will provide these to you to upload for people to access. Because any conceivable street section and design you could want for your downtowns is in that book. I cannot believe they're giving it away for free. I tell you what, let's just suspend the conversation about right on red for later. Welcome bikes. Here you go, Wilson. What is good for the cyclist is good for the pedestrian. And that's really about as much as I'm going to go into it at this point. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. But for millennials, this is one of the key determinants of where they choose to live, is if it's a cyclist-oriented biking community. Now, of course, here in the South, the real problem we have is not the roadway. I mean, I'm surprised at Pickens because of your topography. Columbia is relatively flat. The issue we have is with climate and lacking the infrastructure. If I was to cycle to work, it'd be sweaty, the lack of showers at the other end. But if we can solve some of those problems, we can make the cyclist community a lot more happy. Any conditions that benefit and support pedestrians will necessarily and indirectly benefit and support cyclists. In my recommendations, I will talk about some specific design issues and recommendations that I have. The one thing you do need to know, and Wilson, you may or may not have experienced this, is when you talk about cyclists, there is a wide range of cyclists. I mean, you got just the casual people, you got the racers, and then you've got what I call the militant cyclists. Their attitude is, why should I have a secondary road? I have every right to this road as a car. And I'm not going to debate that point. It's just you need to know you can't just throw out the word cyclist and think you're talking about everybody because it's a broad range. You got to figure out which segment of the cycling community you want to kind of cater to or appeal to in your communities. Shape the spaces. Of course, this is the kind of stuff you normally hear me talk about. This is the kind of stuff where Main Street is ideally suited to create a sense of enclosure. And what this basically means is a sense of enclosure is a universal human need. Yes, we like open spaces, but we also like edges. We like to be able to, it's kind of the predator. We like to see, and we like to be seen. Okay? We want to have a place of refuge. And that happens both on the micro scale, in other words, this zone that's created by the edge of the buildings, the flatness of sidewalks, and the enclosure of the tree. We also enjoy it in the macro, where this entire roadway is the floor, this line of buildings is the wall, this is the wall, and the implied ceiling of kind of a common building height. That creates a sense of enclosure that we enjoy in our Main Street districts. You need to pay attention to make sure the buildings contribute to that. In other words, we want to prefer figural space over figural objects, and this is simply what that means. Human beings don't like to just ramble in the midst of a desert. They like a sense of enclosure. And so we have these spaces, but spaces work best, even vegetated ones, when they are enclosed and bordered with strong edges of buildings. And the problem, and I'm so glad you picked on architects, is we want to make these objects that we want you to look at, as opposed to they should be a part of the fabric that define the spaces that we want to congregate and live in. So you understand the point I'm making? Is make sure our downtown environments contribute to enclosure through proper building siting, placement, and design. Plant trees. He says it straight up. He says, I don't want to pick out of these 12, which I think is the most important, but this one might be my favorite. Biggest bang, oftentimes for the least amount of bucks. I dare you, can you think of a single one of your favorite walkable places that doesn't have a robust tree canopy? So I figured, yeah. And so by all means, plant trees. We planted them yesterday, and Carrie, I'll come back to you later to tell them what not to plant. And yeah, and the benefits aren't just health and appearance. I mean, there's so many other ones environmentally, et cetera, et cetera. Make unique building faces. Tell me how far would you walk on that street? I can't even tell you where I'd stop, because every 5 seconds there's something new and interesting and different for me to look at. This whole concept of walk appeal, how far we will walk, is all about what we encounter along the way. Remember that whole notion of a purposeful walk and a pleasing walk. People don't want to just feel safe and comfortable, they want to be entertained, and especially today's human beings. I mean, look at the vibrancy both on the building edge as well as the street edge. And so our buildings need to contribute to that. We don't need to have long blank faces. We don't want to have reflective windows. We want people to have this dialogue and this interaction between our buildings, the streetscape, and the sidewalks. Yeah, never underestimate the importance of edges, edges, edges. Doesn't matter if it's a park, a parking lot, a building, edges, a plaza, edges are critical. We're going to talk about downtown stickability and some of my recommendations in a minute. Form-based code is one way you can get at making sure the buildings are shaped the way you want them to. And again, they've offered that free of charge as well. And I'll give you those links. Last but not least is pick your winners. And basically, he asked this question that I basically asked you in Marshall, was like, where can I spend the least amount of money to get the biggest impact? You can't do everything at one time to achieve a walkable community. So prioritize, and stay the course. He talks about this notion of anchors and paths. The malls had it right. They had the anchors, and those took you beside all of the smaller stores. We need to do the same thing in our communities. Be thinking, think about Greenville. He talks about Greenville. He said he's both complimentary and then he's a little bit negative. He says that was their motif. They had the anchor of the Marriott and the anchor of the Peace Center, and the path in between benefit all those restaurants. And then what they did is they tore down the bridge to the River Fox, and now there's a new farther anchor, and now they've got the baseball field. His only criticism, by the way, he exuded compliments, but he said the only criticism of Greenville is basically limited to that one street. It falls off very fast once you leave that one street. All right, so here's my take on his book. It's a great book. It's incredibly thorough, and in my estimation, it is the single best one-volume book on this topic. And if you haven't read it, you should. But I'll be critical in a moment. The references to external resources he gives are incredible, and they're free. And he has all the statistics you need to defend this. The only problem is they tend to be geared towards larger cities. So we have to be able to interpolate it down to ours. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. You got to understand, he has a very strong idea. And I think in the South we have to be very careful, because if you play the car suck card, you're going to have a battle on your hands you probably can't win. Because if you treat this as a zero-sum game, you have winners and losers, I don't think anybody's going to win. You got to figure out a way that we can accommodate both the cars and the walkers, and I'd say by extension, the cyclists. Yeah.
What does he think about roundabouts?
You know what? Interesting, Wilson, he did not talk about them in great detail, but I think there was one passing reference, and I think he was, for the most part, fairly complimentary. They're great for cars, they're tough on the pedestrian. Is that your take too?
Yeah, well, it's just people in the South, myself included.
Freak out.
In Europe or up north, and they're everywhere. You get all kind of competing against the roundabouts. I just thought it, I didn't know if he had a view on it.
He didn't weigh on it per se. All right, for sake of time, I'm going to have to really fly. I mean, we started late, but I'm still going to try to get us back on early. How many of you have been to one of Dan's talks at a Main Street conference? Really? Okay. Well, Dan's a great guy. I mean, you can tell within 5 seconds he's a leftover hippie, but you know, he's a great guy. And his claim to fame is he does these walkability audits and on-site things with people. I mean, literally walking the streets. That's under that. Measuring the streets, all that kind of stuff. But my point to you is, if you can hire him or somebody like it, great. But if not, do it yourself. There's a great Delaware walkability assessment tool that, again, I'm going to provide you through the links from Beppy's site. And then he has his own list of 10 keys to walkable communities, and you can see, I'm not going to read all these, but if you scan it quickly, you can see they share a lot in common with Spec's list. And the only ones I'm going to point out is linkages to neighborhoods are critical. Remember this whole relationship to housing, it all comes back to the schools, and to a lesser degree parks. And last but not least, celebrated public spaces and public life. When it gets to my recommendations, that's kind of where I'm going to start. Jan Gale, again, is on the international scene. He's a really, really big deal. His claim to fame is writing this book, Cities for People. And he makes some statements which I agree with, and I'm going to summarize. This is really rude to him. His entire book and presentation in 8 slides in about 3 minutes. But here is his argument. Every city, virtually every city, has a traffic department or somebody who has all these statistics and data about traffic and parking. Okay? And moreover, if you come into those towns to plan them, traffic and cars and all that stuff will absolutely be a part of the process. Conversely, well, let me build up even more tension. You got architects looking after the buildings, you got landscape architects looking after the landscape, but who is looking after the people space? The actual place where most of us inhabit and experience our downtowns. And his compelling rhetorical question is, do you know of any city department for pedestrians and public life? But that's where we experience our downtowns. I promise that's not me. Stay back? Okay. And so, but I've got great news. I think that's the role for Main Street. I think we are the perfect entity to be charged to function almost like the city department that cares about and is charged with waking up every single day, thinking about the pedestrian and public life. Because his point right here is absolutely true. The most important scale of all is people scale. The city and island, whatever 5 kilometers equates to in our distances. Then he wraps up, he has 5 principles to achieve a lively city that's full of activities and animation. We can come back to that in a second. Attractive, safe, of course. Sustainable, absolutely. This is my favorite one. Healthy, which of course, walking and cycling communities will contribute to health. It's close to Houston. And so I just think, and by the way, so I'm going to go out there and conversation, that way if you agree or disagree, what we need to tweak, okay? Now, if you remember, Jeff Speck, when his recommendation to the TFD, he laid out this quote, where he sees at least one lady in those suggestions. Now, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but when we were in Susie's town of Hartsville a couple of months ago, I said virtually the same thing. And I teed up my presentation by saying, if I told you there was a place in the life of your cities where you could spend less money than you normally do in something associated with complicated facade grants or streetscapes, but you might actually get more visual impact, would you be interested to know where it was? I proceeded to just show you slide after slide of what I call vibrancy or amenity grants, because this is my other quote. This is downtown Greenville. And the point I made about downtown Greenville is the architecture is mediocre at best, but the environment is fabulous. And so you don't even care. Honestly, you don't even notice the architecture. The architecture is just a backdrop. Remember that notion of figural space versus figural object? All the buildings do in Main Street Greenville is just frame this fabulous space where there's all these great restaurants and activity. Because the bottom line is experience and environment trump architecture every time. And so my number one recommendation based on specs, stuff, and ours on a scale to South Carolina is I would offer vibrancy and amenity grants if you possibly can. So that you can artificially on the front end introduce splashes of color, activity, engagement, things that are going to cause your downtowns to be infinitely more stickable. I love this photograph. Pay attention. Obviously, it's a parklet. Does everybody know what a parklet is? Because if not, I'm going to camp out on recommendation number 5. It's basically taking 1 or 2 parking spaces and giving them over to a pop-up park. That's all it is. But, you know, right out there is a fabulous giant checkerboard, which is one of those easy ways to create stickability in your downtown because kids and families like to play it. Look what see what they did to create theirs? They just bought a bunch of frisbees. Brilliant, brilliant idea. Norfolk, Virginia probably has the single best vibrancy grant program out there. Now, none of us are going to come within a mile of offering the kind of money they do. Are you ready? They offer up to $50,000 for some of their vibrancy grants. And go out and, let me see, on the next slide. Wow. Okay, here we go. Selections. Yeah, click on the selections tabs and look at some of the projects they funded. They're so fabulous. You know, rolled up garage doors for restaurants so that just like across the street on a good day like this, you can have outdoor dining, both indoor, in the restaurant and out of the restaurant. All manner of sculpture and public art, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, if you're just looking, you know, like Hartsville does a good job for their component grants, you can just go on the website, you can find the details, you can do the application, same with Norfolk. But just imagine the difference it would make if your downtown was populated with little pockets, you know, of color, whether it's Adirondack chairs or bistro umbrellas like we have right here. I love the rocking chairs y'all added out in the alley, Avery and John. This is one of my favorite. This is one of my neighbors, Eileen, you know, and she created this interactive art by taking disposed propane tanks of different sizes that when you play them, they have a different tone. You know, and here's a great shot of Hartsville. You know, but just imagine if we, in certain instances, we helped underwrite the infusion of these things with our different merchants. And again, sometimes the argument we hear is we don't have enough space. This is Kent, Michigan. Look, you can see these tables down. They only protrude out about 18 inches into the walking area. You can do this on a small sidewalk, and if not, wait till recommendation number 5, because I'm going to encourage you to do parklets. Don't forget about the sidewalk. I mean, let's have some fun with these things. The 2 ladies that do these magic carpet murals, they're going to be in Lake City this year for Artfield to come see them. Interactive art, you know, just knock yourself out. I mean, what are the qualities of a walk, a purposeful walk that will cause people to walk? It's got to be interesting. And these things will create interest and vitality on the front end before you have to make the very expensive investments in housing, roadway transformations, and things of that nature. These are some of the things that we proposed for Aiken. You know, this is downtown Columbus, Georgia. They've got all these parkways. You know, just put up some bocce. You know, you got the place for it, cornhole. I mean, just create these opportunities. And again, you've already done this right outside the giant checkers, giant Jenga. Just create these opportunities in our downtown parks, pocket parks, public spaces, just for people to interact and make them stay longer. Number 2 is housing. But this one's hard and this one's expensive. So I'm going to encourage you to think about housing in 3 ways. First of all, you probably are going to have to figure out some meaningful incentive to get the housing that you want. The good news is we've got these things called historic tax credits and so many other things that we can add to our local incentives toolkit. And then streamline the process. Kudos to John and his group for creating the one-stop shop for development. So if I want to develop housing here, I just go to his office, and everything I need for plan review and approval happens in that one place. Well, Hartsville does it with the Navigator. Great job. But here's probably the key that I'm going to camp out right now is add variety and expand your market. Yes, I love upper floor loft apartments. Love, 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 love. The problem is supply, and occasionally the problem is either the lack of capability or the willingness for the property owner to do it, because it can be difficult. Like the way I put it is, it's not hard, but it's not easy. All right. So you may want to also think about other products that expand your downtown housing market. And the other benefit of this too is you might be able to hit multiple and different price points to make your downtown housing more accessible. For example, this is, did y'all see this on your walking tour? Yeah, this is a brand new infill insertion right along which street? Lawrence, with retail and professional offices on the bottom and condominiums, but it could have easily been apartments on the top. Ryberg did a great insertion that I couldn't find a photo of. It just looks very historic. In Lake City, we've just gotten tired of waiting on the property owners who refuse to develop their upper floor. We've offered incentives at the wazoo, and they aren't doing it. So we're like, time's up, we're moving on. And so this is a concept that's referred to in the industry as pocket neighborhoods. And the beauty of pocket neighborhoods is on just typically 1 or at the most 2 congregated sites in a very small area downtown. You can assemble smaller cottage-scaled residences around a common green space. Now, if your cup of tea is the house in the suburbs with your own driveway, your own garage, your own yard, this is not for you. Okay, you gotta like people. And so you assemble all of these, and the economy is you congregate the parking and you congregate the common green space, and you can fit more houses. And what we're basically trying to do in Lake City, we've got 3 sites where we're going to market this, is we want to prove to both developers and more precisely property owners that there's pent-up demand for housing in this market, and you don't believe us. And we're going to prove it, and hopefully that'll be the last straw that kind of motivates them, that they can actually make money off of their buildings. Plant trees. And Carrie, plant shade trees, not bushes, aka crepe myrtles. Anything you want to say? No, right from Paris. No, just here's the only thing I'll say about trees. Merchants are going to scream, and it's like this is when you need to dog ear and point the page in this where he talks about the financial benefit of trees to properties. It is an undeniable correlation that properties with trees have higher appreciative values than those without. The problem is historically, because we listened to the merchants, and I don't mean that in a diminutive way, but they said, don't make it block my building, plant a small tree. The problem is when a small tree grows up, the canopy is right in the way. But if you plant a honking big tree, an actual shade tree, like a pin oak or willow oak, or, I'm sorry, this is your field, go to your local landscape architect. You can see perfectly fine into all those storefronts because the canopy is well above it. It's only a problem when you plant these small trees. So plant big, actual shade trees. And when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Smaller block sizes. And again, you know the reason why these are helpful now. The problem, of course, is our cities have already been built. So what can we do to play some tricks and make them feel like smaller block sizes? I would absolutely, every single time, if you can afford it, put a mid-block crossing, okay? If you want to cut down on jaywalking in your downtowns, add a mid-block crossing. If you want to slow traffic down in your downtowns, add a mid-block crossing. If you want to increase vitality and interest in your downtown, add a mid-block crossing. Okay, because now the motorist can't use the 600 feet from light to light as his personal raceway, because it's going to be broken up at a minimum at every 300 feet. I would encourage, if you can add to it, again, this is Columbus, Georgia, which again, like Aiken, they benefit from sort of a parkway motif. But you can see over here on the building sidewalk side, they've created a node, if you will. And so by adding that people gathering node at the same location as the mid-block crossing, if you think about New York City or Portland right now. Portland, 200-foot blocks. I mean, that's nothing. New York City, I think, is 300 block. So what happens is you perceive the void. And so if you can create a perceived void through some device, whether it's a fountain or a people gathering space at that same interval, then you can kind of artificially create the sense of a mid-block, smaller block through mid-block crossings and landings. Number 5, parklets. This will instantly, by the way, you can't do this everywhere else. You'll take up all your parking, but again, there is a good form of congestion, and this is it. Because you can introduce vibrancy and color, you're going to double the capacity of your sidewalks, and the nice thing about it too is you're going to create these nodes of activity. I mean, otherwise this would be, frankly, a fairly boring sidewalk, but now it has some interest to it, and it also goes back to that sense of enclosure. Now the person walking over here has a really nice sense of enclosure, and if you're lucky, you know, activity spreads up around these. Obviously, this parklet needs to be on a side street because we got people dancing in the roadway. But again, parklets can just artificially introduce life and vitality and interest in your downtown.
Randy, do you recommend moving them around every so often?
You could, absolutely. Matter of fact, when I was doing research, I found these portable parklet parks where one of the cities, literally, they carved out an old container, you know, like a container truck. And they hitch it up and they move it around the city. It's pedestrian and auto interest. And balance is the key word. If we're gonna ask the motorist to slow down, then we need to ask the pedestrian to behave well as well. The first one, and Dan Burden says this all the time, and oh man, I love these as a motorist, but I hate them as a pedestrian. Right turns on red is the quickest way to kill a pedestrian. Okay, and the reason is quite simple, because if you've got by right that you can turn right on red, which direction are you looking to see if you can make the turn? Left. But where's the pedestrian? Across on the right. Of course, he or she thinks he can because they've got the light, they can see the light. And so more pedestrian car wrecks happen at right turns on red. And so in your downtown core, you need to think really hard about what locations you want to allow right on red. And I would suggest that you minimize those. I like this one. No right turn red when pedestrians are present. Perfect. That means if there aren't any pedestrians present, then I can make the right turn red. But if they are, I can slow down. Now, if we're going to do that, I think these are cheap and they're important. If you're going to add all those mid-block crossings, you absolutely should install these. Number 3, but then the pedestrian needs to play nice. If we're going to ask a car to stop while you're in the crosswalk, get your butt in the crosswalk, okay? I literally saw this happen the other day. So here's the line. The car's behind the line. This is downtown Main Street, Columbia, by the way. And so the pedestrian goes behind this car, and this car, I'm trying to think how this went. Oh, he couldn't decide. So the car had the right of way, but he's stopping because he's going to get this guy. And the walker is just like giving him a piece of mind. Like, dude, 6 feet from here, you walk there, and you have your legal right to wag your finger, but not if you're back here. And I'm like, so we have to have common courtesy. I mean, look, the crosswalk's right there. And so I would encourage enforcing jaywalking. Maybe it's just a warning or just whatever. Like, we're trying to make this a walkable downtown. But the only way we're going to make it walkable is if you obey by the rules that we're asking the cars to obey as well. Add bike lanes. And again, oftentimes, well, first of all, a couple of caveats. Spec says never add it if it forces you to widen the road. Okay. But if you can do it within your existing curb cuts and just put it on a road diet, then add them. The argument that we hear oftentimes is, well, if we put them over there, then cars are going to interrupt. And so one of the big things that's happening anymore is they're pulling the parallel parking away from the curb, and the bike lane stays beside it. Now, as a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk, I feel even safer. I mean, I felt safe enough that all of these fundamentals were here, but I feel even safer now.
How does the cyclist feel about it? I mean, it's sort of strange.
Thank you, and that's a great question, because remember that range of cyclists? Some, like the mom and pop, if I'm with my kids, I love this. But for the serious cyclists, they don't like this. They want to be in the roadway. And that's why even spec says, if you don't have enough width, then just let them share the lane. Yes, it will be an impediment on the car, but it's only marginally so. And again, you have to understand, our streetscapes don't look like this. Most of your towns are much, much smaller sections. But never, ever, 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 never, repeat after me, never, remove curbside parking just to create a bike lane. The National Main Street Center estimates that for every curbside space that's removed, it costs the adjacent business $10,000. We're almost done. Hide the parking. If it's a surface park, put a very significant buffer of either landscaping or ornamental stuff for the people in Sumter. Mayor Riley has this wonderful quote: 25 feet of building can conceal 250 feet of parking garage. And what he means by that is if you put a first floor amenity and you step it back, if you're a pedestrian walking, you will barely even be able to see the parking structure behind. In case you didn't know, that's a parking garage, okay, that's in downtown Charleston. Does it cost more than a plain garage? Absolutely. But think about the investment over the life of your city. So you can conceal a whole lot of parking garage through what you put and the scale of the building and the uses on the first floor of that garage. Next to last but not least is roadway treatments, the road diets that Susie referred to. Already have an exception to the rule by virtue of being in Aiken. Remove one-way pairs. The only reason one-way pairs work in Aiken, and they when I say they work, they're still confusing for the motorist, but it's because of the parkways. I mean, in other words, the whole city was laid out in this manner. But if your cities were laid out in a traditional manner and you've got one-way pairs, I would strongly encourage you over time, this is expensive, long-term, don't do this early in the walkability process, convert them back to two-way streets. Number one, you open up 50% more usable, visible space for the motorist. Your businesses are going to love you because the people that they just saw their business over their shoulders, they passed by in the opposite direction. Now they can actually stop in those businesses. And last but not least, and it could be number one, is maybe you want to think about with your design committee and Main Street organization creating a walkability plan. And actually, what could we do to make our cities and towns more walkable? And then just do the Greenville model, stay the course, and just keep plugging at it year after year after year. And then to Aiken's point is make people aware of what's going on and celebrate your success. So let me mention this, and I'll turn the floor to you. So here are the 4 resources that I mentioned along the way. I have them on the website that you can access via the Main Street website. But again, I did my very best to try to extract all of those big thinkers' ideas into some practical recommendations. Were there any of my recommendations that gave you heartburn, anything you would do differently? And we only have about 3 minutes, so go quick. Any questions you have or comments you have?